I'm gonna ask probably the most asked question you get.
All right.
You're sitting at home, you're sitting in your office, and Robert Jordan calls.
Okay.
The other thing is, am I gonna need a wheelbarrow to carry out the last book, because they're getting thicker and bigger, and I don't know how you're gonna get everything there.
Well, let's answer the second one first. The Memory of Light is the longest of the 3 I've done, but it is not quite as long as books 6 or 4 that Robert Jordan did. So if you could carry those ones, you'll be able to carry this, because it's in between Towers of Midnight and those. And those two were about the same length. So it is big. It is the biggest of the ones I've done, but fortunately, I don't have to worry about, it being that big.
And if all else fails, this is a good time to launch Brandon Sanderson Wheelbarrow Rentals.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'll brand some Tor brand wheelbarrows. Bookstores need an extra revenue stream anyway, right? I never spoke to Robert Jordan. I didn't know him. I saw him once at a convention, just walking by, and had a fanboy moment. And that's the closest I came. The story is that before he died, he changed his mind on having the series finished. In fact, he had for years said, we're going to burn the notes, so hope that I don't die before the series is done, because I'm not going to have it done. I'm going to have what did he say? Something like I'm going to have my hard drive smelted or something like that. Before he died, he went to his wife and said, I do want to have this finished. I would like you to find somebody. Now, his wife, Harriet, had been the one who discovered him. She was an editor first. She discovered him, and then she married him, which is probably a really good way to make sure your editorial advice gets taken, right? So she edited many of Tor's great books. She edited Fred Saberhagen. She edited Ender's Game. She acquired and edited that. Harriet's a big deal. She's now retired, but she's in her 70s. But she was the first editor of Tor Books when it was founded, which is the biggest publisher of science fiction fantasy now in the world, probably because of her discovering things like Ender's Game and The Wheel of Time. So he went to her and asked her to find somebody. She considered this a dying request. At his funeral, she got together a kind of, super PAC of people, Wheel of Time fans and publishers and things, and said, okay, I can't rest until I know someone's working on this. Give me names. And so they compiled a list of people they thought would be good to finish the series, and I wasn't on it. I was a very new author at that point. I only had 2 books out, because Mistborn 2 wasn't even out yet. But I had, like a lot of Wheel of Time fans, many of us had written things, and I'd written a few paragraphs on my website in eulogy. They're still on there. It's just, some things that I talked about, what he had meant to me and things like this. And a friend of Harriet's read that and was compiling all these things for her, right? Was getting just all of the things that nice things that the people had written. It was a gift that Harriet's friend wanted to do for her, because Harriet wasn't going to be spending time a lot on the internet finding these things, so she printed them all off in a big stack, and she actually took mine and put it on the top, and gave it to Harriet and said, you need to look at this kid, because this is an author who, something about what he wrote, he's a Wheel of Time fan and he's an author, you should look into his books. And Harriet actually didn't have time to look at the stack. So her friend then called her and said, look at that one on the top, and nudged her again. I later sent this woman cookies. Yeah. Actually, I sent her cookies every month for a year, because she wrote me and said, you owe me cookies for this, and so I sent her Cookie of the Month because she deserved it. So Harriet read that and said, who is this guy? And called the publisher at Tor and asked for some of my books. At that point, she called me on the phone unexpectedly, and I actually got up in the morning, and I'm 2 hours off of New York, and I get up late anyway because I write at night. So I got up at around noon, check my voicemail, and there is a voicemail message that says, "Hello, Brandon Sanderson. This is Harriet McDougal Rigney, Robert Jordan's widow." His real name was James Rigney. "I would like you to call me back. There's something I want to talk to you about." Yep. And so I picked my jaw up off the floor and called her back, and she didn't actually answer because she was out at the moment. And so I called my editor, and he didn't answer. So I called my agent, who always answers, and he didn't answer. So I'm walking around in circles, not knowing what's going on, and I finally get a hold of Tor offices and talk to Patrick Nielsen Hayden, an editor there, and I say, "Patrick, Robert Jordan's widow just called me." And he says, and I quote him, he really says, "Oh yeah, that's probably what you think it is. I'll have her call you back." I don't know what I thought it was. And so I went up and I tried to explain to my wife, and I'm not normally a nervous person, right? I'm very, calm and collected, and I was stammering. She thought that, maybe my mother had died or something. It was just this weird experience. And Harriet then calls me and says, "Well, I read what you wrote about Robert Jordan. I've read some of your works. I would like to know if you're interested in finishing The Wheel of Time." And it was this surreal experience. It's these sort of things that just don't happen, right? It's like it's so life-changing, but it also involves such a big, monumentous hole inside of you, because I've been reading these books since I was a kid. And Robert Jordan had passed away, and that's, I couldn't be involved in this project without that having happened. And so I describe it, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but like if someone knocked on your door and said, "Congratulations, you won the lottery," and you're like, "I didn't enter the lottery," and they're like, "We know, and here's lots of money, plus, by the way, your grandpa died." And so it's like, which emotion is winning, right? And so I've been very honored to work on them. I said yes. I mean, I've been reading these books since it's one of the first fantasy novels I picked up, and I can't think of something I would more like to be involved in. At that point in my career, if Lucas would have come to me and said, "Take over Star Wars," I would have said no, because, Star Wars is just this fun thing for me. It's not something that was a part of my life the way The Wheel of Time was. It's been an amazing and difficult and wonderous experience. And so that's what it was like for me, I just got the phone call out of the blue. I didn't know I was being considered at all. So write nice things on the internet. You never know who's looking at them.
A lesson to the trolls of the world.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just have another Wheel of Time related question.
Okay, go for it.
I think a lot of readers probably notice the pacing's a little bit different in the books that you've written. And so I'm just wondering, was it difficult to take all the remaining material that Jordan had and try to finish the series with it?
It was. Is that the same question you were going to ask? Oh, wow. Nice work of like implanting that in his brain psychically so you could go sit down. That's good. So, yes, the answer to your question is yes, but let's expand upon it. Working on this book, the metaphor I used yesterday for somebody who asked me about this was, it's like someone picks up this beautiful Ming vase, right? And then they smash it into 1,000 bits. They take half of it and throw it away, put the rest in the bag and hand it to you and say, "Okay, now we want you to put it back together just like it was." That's what this has been like. I was handed 200 pages of notes, which included completed scenes. A few of those, for people who are curious, people always ask, "What's Robert Jordan, what's me?" I try not to say too much. But a few of those, there's one scene from every prologue that was written by him. In Gathering Storm, the farmer sitting on his porch and watching the storm approach was written by Robert Jordan. In Towers of Midnight, the scene of the Borderlanders on top of the tower, where the sun gets a sword, was written by Robert Jordan. And in the last prologue, there's a Kurt character in The Blight, right near the beginning, who was meeting with one of the Forsaken, that scene was written by Robert Jordan. So there were scenes that were complete like that, and there were scenes that were fragments. In the first prologue, there's this scene where some of the Demone are interacting with Rand and things like this. It's kind of a holdover from Knife of Dreams. That's like an epilogue / prologue sort of thing. He wrote like half of that, only it's in like 3 chunks. And things like this. Right? Robert Jordan didn't write linearly. He wrote wherever it appealed to him at the moment, and since he knew his time was near, he wrote some things just because he wanted to get them done, like stuff from the Tower of Genji and the last chapter of the book and things like that he just felt needed to be done. So I did have these touch points throughout all of it, but also included in there were big pieces of dictation that he'd done on his deathbed, mixed with Q&As he'd done with his assistants, where they'd rack their brains trying to ask him, so what happens here? Who killed Asmodean? All of these questions, and him just giving answers, and them writing them down, and having some really good answers, and sometimes it was not a good day because he was dying, and so the answers don't always make a lot of sense, and things like that. And some of them do make a lot of sense. And anyway, he spent his last few weeks trying to get all of this stuff together. So I was given that. And then there is another big pile of notes that are what the assistants remember him saying to them on offhanded comments throughout the 10 years they've been working together regarding the last book. And even with that, there are just enormous holes in what I was given, which is actually somewhat exciting for me, because if it had all just been simply outlined, it would have been perhaps a better sequence of books, because Robert Jordan's then touch would be on them. But at the same time, I wouldn't have been able to do some of the things I wanted to do. Having been a fan for many years, there are certain things that I wanted to do, and there are certain strengths of mine. I pace things different from Robert Jordan. And endings are one of my things. And so being able to work on the ending, you have noticed the pacing. I like things to move a little faster. I think he was doing this already. Knife of Dreams moves a lot faster than previous books. And I just wanted to kind of power on toward the ending and things like that. There are certain things he does much better than I can do. And so I tried to more highlight the things that I do well. Just to make these work. And I do wish, we had the books as he would have written them. They would be more fitting capstones. But we at least have, his ending, his last chapters and things like that. So anyway, that's what's going on there. I do some things a little bit differently. You'll be able to notice the action sequences in particular I do very differently from Robert Jordan. And that's partially because he was actually in combat, and I've just watched a lot of kung fu movies. And so that changes the way that we both view how to do an action sequence. His are more real, more chaotic, and things like that. And mine, you get sequences like Perrin in The Wolf Dream from Towers of Midnight, where you see a little bit more of me playing with the magic system and playing with concepts of combat in it and things like that.
Great. All right, thanks.
Hal-Con!